Hello, today here at Zenzero Electronics about electronics we are gonna talk about my first project in electronics when I decided a few years ago to build an amp from scratch. As it was my first project, I made a ton of mistakes. Hopefully you will learn from these mistakes and not repeat them yourself. The amp I built is this bad boy. I call it the Mutt because outside is a Fender solid state champ chassis from the late 90s, early 2000s, which I got super cheap, but the insides, most of them at least, are from a vintage Fonolo radio, a 1960s Italian valve radio. So let's get into it. One day, a few years ago, I was at a friend's house while staying in Italy for the summer, and I found out that the family's grandpa was trading all kind of ancient stuff, just old crap. But between all the old crap, there was also some Italian tube radios from the 60s and 50s, and I just looked over those, and at the time I really didn't know much at all about tube amplifier or even just electronics, but I was watching some YouTube videos like Uncle Doug's channel, and I got a passion for it. I was quite interested, and this particular radio I found, which was a Fonolo Derby 693C, and was the only one that had something I recognized. He had a EL84. It was powering up, but there was no sound, and I was like, well, you know what? Let me take a look at this bad boy. Maybe I can salvage some components and build myself a simple guitar amplifier. So I took the radio apart and I took all the components I thought were worth saving back to Japan. I got myself a Fender Champ Classic Model 5F1 schematics because I think it's a really simple amp which still sounds killer, especially if cranked up. I made a whole bunch of modification because I have different components, of course. I had an EL84 instead of a 6V6. I had a ECC85 instead of a 12X7, and I got to work. Let's see what I ended up building. So now I needed like somewhere where to build my amplifier, and I just thought about buying the cheapest amp I could find on Yahoo Auction, which are Japanese eBay, and I found this guy for like $10 or so. It was actually, it's not a champ, it's a really cool Frontman 15R, probably from the 90s, and I gathered it out. I also salvaged some components, and I got to work. Now it's been a few years since I built this, and I built it with a super crappy $5 soldering iron, and so I wonder what we're gonna find inside. Maybe I can also fix something. It's still working. It's working fine, but it's a bit crackling sometimes. So let's see. So here are the guts of the Mutt. Let's take a closer look, starting from the power section. Our current comes in from this standard C14 connector, which I rather like. It came with a Fender chassis, and now I use the same connector on pretty much all the projects I have that plug right into a wall, because it's standard and it's really easy to find a cord that matches this wherever you are in the world. So we come in from here. We don't go, here's the thing, we don't go to the main power transformer, because here is a funny story. As soon as I came back to Japan with all the components I scavenged from the old Fonolo radio, I started testing this power transformer to figure out the voltages and trying to build a bridge rectifier, which now it's here under this. So I set up like a breadboard and plug it in and trying to get some DC current. The problem is, every time I tried this, I blew the power break of the house and I almost electrocuted myself, and I was wondering what the hell is going on. And guess what? I guess in the 60s people were like, let's save a couple of bucks on a transformer, and instead of a real transformer, let's get an auto transformer, which I never heard before and I never met since. But what an auto transformer is a just partially isolated transformer. As you see, the filaments are isolated, but the B plus comes from this side of the transformer, which is the same side as the plug that goes directly into the wall. This is not what I would call safe, and to mediate this problem, what I had to do is to get myself a isolation transformer, which is this one. So when we come in from the wall, we go into this isolation transformer, which is actually not the first I bought. It's the second isolation transformer I bought, because the first one was underpowered. And why was it underpowered? Because when I summed up the voltages and all the power I needed to run this simple amplifier, what I didn't account for was the current I needed for the filaments. So I got a really small isolation transformer, but was not enough. I had to ditch that, get this new one. So after we come into this, we go finally to our main power transformer, and from here you can see we go down. Here is the 6.3 volts. It goes here to this switch, and more on that later, and then to the tubes, while the B plus comes out and go to the power section. The power section, I build it here on this test board. We have here a rectifier, and we have here the drop-off resistors. This is the original cap I got from the Fonolo radio. It's still measured okay, so I kept it. It's 2 per 50 microfarad. So as it is significantly more than the caps specified in the schematic for the Fender Champ, which were only 16 microfarad and 8. What I did is I lowered the drop resistors. So in fact we have here, I think these two are in series, where 1K.5 they make 3K for the first drop-off resistor, and then we go to the cap, when we go to this one, the second drop-off resistor 1.5K, and then we go to the final filtering stage, which is these two caps. They are 8 microfarad in parallels. Then we pass through this 100K resistor. They are in parallels. So these two are the anode resistors for the two stages of amplification of ECC 85. Now, before going on to this sweet mess you see here, let's follow the signal from the input jack. We go to the first preamp stage. In the first preamp stage we have this switch which changes the cathode resistor. Why I do that? Again, because I wanted to try out a 12AX7 as opposed to an 1287. As it turns out, everything sounds better on this setting, so I rarely use this switch nowadays. The same goes for this one. This pot is a feedback resistor. I installed it just to try it out. What's the effect of this feedback resistor right here? In the end, I guess Leo Fender was right, and I leave it pretty much all the time here on setting 3, which equivalent to the resistant Leo thought in the beginning. Then I have a master volume, which I added later because I wanted to crank up the preamp stage a bit, at least try it out, and the amp was too loud to do that in my apartment. And then we have here the on-off switch combined with the gain or volume, you would call it. This is actually the original pot I salvaged from the 1960 radio. He had a value, I think it was supposed to be around 1 mega ohm, but with the passage of time it got even higher. I don't think that's a problem. So here you see I actually wired the input from the mains. Maybe not the safest thing to do, but
I also like to live dangerously.
So here we are to the piece of resistance, the biggest mess of this war amplifier. As it was my first project, I really didn't know how to wire up, or I had problems soldering, I had all kinds of different problems. So I didn't feel confident just wiring up an amplifier using like turrets or other methods. So I ended up drawing a PCB style circuit in a really simple, more like paint-like application, more than a really electronical card. And then I printed it myself, and I would highly suggest not to do that because it's really hard to do. You have to use really dangerous chemicals, and it's not cost effective anymore. If I had to do it over again, well, now I will just hand wire it probably, but if you really want to do a PCB, nowadays there are really cheap services that can provide you good quality PCBs for these projects. Anyway, another question you might have is, where are all the other components? I mean, there are a couple of resistors here, but what happened to the rest of the resistors and the caps? Well, let's find out. So here are the components. I ended up recycling, I guess, only this cap from the old radio, and the rest of the components are fairly new. But so why are these things mounted on this side and the sockets are on the other side? That's because, as a completely newbie, I didn't know that the sockets in the schematics of the tubes are read from the bottom. I was completely convinced they were read from the top, and so what I did, I had the sockets actually on this side, and also because all the connections were mirrored and wrong, I was burning out this resistor, which is the cathode resistor for the EL84, over and over again. And I thought, like, what the hell I'm doing? Like, why is it burning? So I substituted with a higher wattage, but it kept smelling bad. And then later I found out that everything was wired in a mirror way. So I desoldered the sockets from this side and surface mounted them on this side. Also, you might notice that my printing job of a PCB was really bad, so what I ended up doing is basically I scored the traces by hand. Yeah, I know it's awful, but guess what? It still works fine nowadays. And when I biased the tube, I added these resistors in parallel to lower the cathode resistor of EL84 until it was fine, because I started with a value which was closer to, yeah, with 470, which is a value that you will expect to work better for a 6v6, and I lowered it to half or even less than half until I got some good readings on the voltages. There are still a few parts to see, and then we will have a tone test. Last part is the output section. This is the original output transformer from the Phonola radio. It was meant for a 3 ohm oval speaker. So what I did, I got the closest things I could get. So I got this Jensen 8 inches 4 ohm speaker, which sound pretty good. I also plugged it to an output jack, and actually too I have a second output jack in parallel, just in case, I don't know, I would like to use 2 8-ohm speakers, which I don't think I will ever do. I don't know, I never ended up using the second output jack, but yeah, maybe one day. So I guess that's it for this look at my first build ever. Before finishing the project, you can see I splurged out and got to make some labels with a Dymo. I shortened some of the wire that were hanging around. I also got a new pilot light. And by the way, here you can see the tubes I'm using. The EL84 is a new one because I burnt out the original one from the radio, while the ECC85, which is actually branded Phonola 3417, is still the original preamp tube from the 60s radio. And I just realized that one thing I forgot to mention is the why I have this switch. So this switch changes the way the filaments of the preamp tubes are connected, because another problem I had during the build of this amplifier is that I couldn't light up the filaments. And why is that? It's because I wired the preamp tube like if it was an ECC81, which is equivalent to a 1287 and is pinout compatible with a 12AX7. But as you can see, this is an ACC81 pinout, and this is an ACC85 pinout. And while they are extremely similar, the filament connection is what is different. So what I did, instead of choosing between one or the other, I made a switch that if I'm using an ECC85, connects one of the filaments here and to pin 4 and 5, while he has pin 9 connected to ground. In the case I'm using an ECC81, is gonna connect one of the filaments to pin 4 and 5 and the other filament to pin 9. So, hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you learned something, and maybe you're not gonna do my same mistakes. Here are some of the things you might want to pay attention when you build an amplifier. First of all, an autotransformer is not a transformer. I know maybe nowadays they're rare to find, but just be sure to check which one you find, especially in some old radio. Always account for the filaments current when you're making overall power calculations about your amp. Don't print your PCB. I know it might sound tempting, but it's actually really hard, and nowadays there are so much better solutions. Either get your PCB printed or just wire the amp by hand. Might be all better solutions. Another really important thing is like the tube data sheets are read from the bottom. You see the socket of the tube from the bottom in the datasheet, not from the top like most other more modern components like ICs and stuff. Another important point is a 6v6 is not an EL84. They might have similar power outputs, but they need different bias. Also, an ECC81 is not an ECC85. ECC85 are really not common nowadays, but if you find one and you want to use it, just remember you have to wire up the filaments in a different way. Actually, if you find some old ECC85, it might be worth doing this small modification to your amp so you can use some vintage tubes which are going to be way cheaper than the equivalent ECC81. And lastly, I hope you found out that even stuff that look like crap, like my small Mutt amp, can still sound pretty good. So that's it. If you wanna see more, check out our other videos. Also check out our pedals and check out our t-shirts on our website zenzeroelectronics.com. Thank you for watching and bye.